All right, hi everyone. Thank you for coming to to our workshop on designing PowerPoints. My name is Lance Katigbak. I am the president and founder of Springboard, and I'll be leading the workshop for today. So just to give you an overview of how the workshop's going to go, I'm going to run through the presentation really quickly. I'm going to go through some basic principles in coming up with presentations. We're going to run through a list of like fun and interactive things that you can do to your own PowerPoints, like basically PowerPoint cheats, how you can make the most out of your PowerPoints. And then I'm going to actually go ahead and show you how to do them in PowerPoint, and you can follow along if you're interested. We're going to upload the slides online to our website afterwards, and all we ask is that you complete a short post-event survey afterwards so that we know how we do, and we know how we can improve for future events. All right? So yeah, so let's get, and if you have questions, please hold them until the end of the discussion. All right. So we're going to start with what we call 4 basic PowerPoint principles that apply to any PowerPoints regardless of what you're presenting for. The first one is know your audience. Are you designing a PowerPoint for a corporate client who is very conservative and wants very strict, very muted colors? Are you designing for a class where your professor is okay with you doing whatever you want? Is it for a startup deck? Are you pitching to investors? Knowing these things is important because it allows you to tailor your presentation in a way that meets your target audience. You don't want to make let's say a very stern PowerPoint for a fun group because people aren't going to appreciate that. At the same time, you don't want something super wacky for a corporate client because they're not going to take you seriously. Secondly, 1 idea per slide. And this is probably the most important thing that you're going to learn. Each slide should only emphasize 1 basic thing. Of course, there are ways to go around it. Like here, there are 2 ideas. But you know that one of them is the main idea. And the other is just to remind you of what happened afterwards in case you were taking notes or something like that. But the key thing here is 1 big idea per slide. Third, start with structure. What does this mean? It means that when you are creating your presentation, you never start in PowerPoint. You're probably better off starting in Microsoft Word or on a piece of paper. Write down the structure. What are you going to start talking about? Are you going to start first with an introduction of your club or of your organization or of your group? Or are you going to start by telling a story? These things are important, and it allows you to have greater flow when you're coming up with a PowerPoint. Because otherwise, if you don't come up with a structure, what happens is you just end up creating a bunch of random slides, and then you're going to realize, oh, they don't fit, oh, they don't connect with one another. But you want them to connect because that's the best way to deliver a good presentation. Third, supplement, not replacement. Your slides should never be able to replace you as a speaker. If you can disappear and these slides play themselves, if you could get the same thing out of me standing here, then I don't need to be here, right? So the slide should only serve to supplement whatever it is I'm teaching. If you want to give out your slides afterwards, you can prepare a modified slide deck with notes or something. Or you can add notes to the comment section of PowerPoint. They're there for a reason. And one of the reasons is so that you don't just put all the information you want on the slide. Okay? So those are the 4 basic tips and 4 basic principles. There might be more. There might be a few others. But these are the ones that I like to keep in mind, and I think that they're going to help you a lot. All right, so let's go to the fun stuff. Let's go to what I call the 7 PowerPoint design cheats. Okay, and I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, and you're probably going to go, how do I do that? And I'll talk about that later. All right, and these are things that you apply also mostly to every presentation you're going to come up with. So first, colors. I like colors. A lot of people don't take their colors seriously. They'll use black, they'll use gray, they'll use yellow or red, and that's it. But there's a lot more that you can do with colors. And one great source for colors is this website called color.adobe.com. It used to be called Adobe Cooler, K-U-L-E-R. Now they changed it to Adobe Color CC. And I'm going to show you very quickly how that works. So if you go to color.adobe.com and you go to Explore, you can see that people come up with a bunch of these color themes, and you can steal them. They're free, right? Nobody owns colors, but you can. But if you see a color palette that you like, so for example, and they're really nice to look at, I know. Let's say I like this one, flat UI. I can go to Edit, and then for each one, I see what do you call the hex code, and this 6-digit thing. So for each color, so if I wanted to make a presentation, I could pick a couple of these. So this might be my background color. The title might be this color. The body text might be this color. And things I want to emphasize might be in this color. And the way I do that, and I'll show it to you later, you can just go to PowerPoint and change the colors. And this is a very easy way to not have to think of colors that work on your own, right? So that's the first thing. And now you're already wondering, yes, I got my money's worth for this presentation, or no money's worth. Okay. Second thing, typography. A lot of people, again, don't take this seriously, but this is like the easiest way to make your presentations look really good. So simply changing the weight is the thickness, and the size can make big differences. So, and this is proof of that. So this font is called DIN, and then this is bold, this is regular, this is also bold but in a different color, and this is italics. I'm sure you all know. But the point is there are many fonts that you can do this to. Gotham is a great one, and you can use Gotham Light, and you can contrast that with Gotham Bold. So for example, if you're going to come up with a title, you could make the first half light and the second half in bold. And that would look so much better than just making the whole thing in bold, right? So what you also want to do is to have like certain maybe categories of texts. So for example, your title types are in one style. And a style is basically the font, the color, and the size. So all my titles are going to be in this teal, bold font. And then body text looks like this. Anything I'm emphasizing is a bit smaller, but it's orange, so it's bright. And then all quotations are italicized. So you want to keep this kind of consistent structure all throughout your presentation, just so it looks a lot better, it looks a lot cleaner, and it's going to look a lot more impressive. Images. So when a lot of people use images, they put it like in this. They use the default template where there's text on the left side and images on the right side, which is the absolute worst way to put an image in your text. Like nobody will want to look at the picture and the image. So my rule of thumb is it should always be full screen by default. Let me give you an example of that. This one, very simple, and it allows you to see the image. And another very useful technique is if you put the image and you put a black solid. This is just like a black rectangle, and then you lower the transparency to like 20–30%, and you add text in front of it. It looks so much cooler. It looks so much more impressive, right? And it also allows you to put text over it. This is one thing you can do. Another thing, this is the original image. What you can also do is add a shape and put the text over that shape. And this could be anything. This could be any shape. A circle or like a 3/4 circle looks really good, and it looks like. And you can maybe even add like another rectangular box here if you want to add something else. But these are like very easy to use, and as you can see here, it's effective. One last thing, if you want to put a lot of text, you can have a whole orange bar or something across the text, and you can have like more text here. And this is a combination of the typography lessons plus the image lessons, and then just using shapes strategically. Shapes are not just meant to be used there to put a random triangle or a random circle somewhere in your presentation. They're there to do things like this. And since we're on the topic, so another great place to put images. So there are a couple of rules of images. Like one, you always want to use a high resolution image. You don't want to go to Google Images and just pick out a random image there. There are a lot of great resources. One is Flickr. If you go to Flickr and you can search there, you can search for any image you like, and you'll have photos taken by professional photographers, and you can sometimes you can use them depending on like the licensing. Another great place is if you Google like stock photos, there are places to look, and I'm going to send out a link. There's going to be a link in the presentation afterwards where you can look at that. And this photo is from there. If you go to the website of Springboard, most of the photos are stock photos. I didn't take any of those, except for the ones with us in it. But you can see that they look really impressive. They don't mean anything. Like this is just someone typing, but this image just looks so much cleaner and so much better by default. And you're probably going to respect me a lot more as opposed to if this was just like white, right? Okay, moving on. Backgrounds and transitions. Again, this is something that a lot of people often neglect, but these are things that can add a lot of jazz to your presentation. So there are a couple of backgrounds that I like to use. So of course you could go with a plain white. And what I did here, I don't know if you noticed, it's just a very simple orange and blue bar. These are just shapes with colors. Like this is nothing fancy. This is just a shape, and I think it adds like a bit of jazz. It makes the presentation look a bit more professional. But there are a few more things you can do when it regards to backgrounds. One is to use a very pale gray. This is very helpful because I don't know, like a light gray. It's not too bright, but it looks kind of comforting. If you go to a lot of websites, a lot of their backgrounds are not actually white. They're very pale gray, like 10% gray, and they just look a lot cleaner. One other thing you can do is what we call a pale gradient. You can't really see it here, but this is like lighter gray and this is darker gray, and this is a radial gradient. So this is lighter and it becomes darker. And And again, it just looks, a bit more 3D, adds a bit more depth, and makes it look a bit nicer. The popping solid, just a bright color, works really well for transitions. So, and if you've been noticing, but every time I've talked about like a different, I broke it down into sections by inserting just these solid colors, and they stand out, they look nice, they make you happy because it's a bright color, and it also emphasizes whatever is on it, right? So instead of making the text colored, you could make the background colored and the text white. So that's another thing you can do. Fourth, the grid. This is a table. I inserted a table that was 10 columns by 8 rows, and then I just made it fill the whole thing. And now this looks like some kind of engineering, technical background, right? Which, looks a lot cleaner, looks a lot nicer. And then there's also the pattern, and a lot of people don't know this, but there's a way in PowerPoint of inserting patterns. Like this is a dot pattern. There are patterns which are like zigzags and stuff. And you can insert patterns which just make it look a bit more three-dimensional and stuff. So this is also the section for transitions, and there are a couple of transitions you can use. I've kind of scattered them throughout the presentation. I was using like a very standard fade for this one, so you can see the differentiation. But later on, like it's going to move down and up, and there's actually some logic into that. Like it's going to move up whenever it's going to move up whenever there's like sub contents, and it's going to move back down when it's going to go to like the main titles. So there is some logic to that, and you can play around with the transitions really well. Now moving on to positions. What are positions? They're places where you can strategically put text so that they look better. And I use the grid background so you can see where they are, like relative to the other elements of the screen. So the title can go right here in the middle, but not centered, like more aligned to the left. Why? I don't know. It just looks better. I think it does. Like it adds up. Like you know that when you look at it, it's not your run-of-the-mill PowerPoint. Like somebody put some effort into it, because they changed the default. And a lot of things look better if you just change the default. And you can put the title there, and if you want to put a quote, you can put it here. So some inspirational quote can go there. Now, one of the things with quotes, we always like to use quotes for our presentations, but sometimes they're really long, and I never really know what to read. So one useful thing you can do is bold certain parts. So if I want to talk about the inspirational quote part, I can bold that. If I want to talk about the dead guy, I can bold his name too. And you can do this, and again, this is just like, I just copied the slide, made it bold, and then, went to a different slide, pasted it again, and made that bold. And I'll show you how to do this later, but if you are having trouble grasping that. But again, this is like just very straightforward stuff. Other places, you can try this on up top. You can use this as a title, or you can use that just for, anything you want to introduce. Or you can put it in the bottom right corner. And the corners are usually very helpful if you don't just want to put it in the middle, because the middle it's nice, but it gets boring. We're always used to looking at the middle, and it's nice to get your audience looking around, because when they look around, they're like more active, and they're not going to get bored as much because their eyes are moving in like four different directions. And if you want to use a lot of text, you can use large, short words aligned in the left side, and this could be anything from like, I don't know, your mission statement or something, just so it doesn't go here. It's just easier to read if you do it like this. What else? And you can also use this to emphasize, like that was some basic animations there, just like moving the text and making something pop up. Animations, we'll talk about that more later, but animations can be connected to one another to make them flow a lot better, make them look a lot easier. All right. And you could have an image here potentially, or you could just keep this blank. But now you know that, oh, I have to look at this thing because it's bright orange, right? I have to look at that. I'll take questions after the presentation. One other thing is if you're going to use numbers, make them take up around 70% of the screen. Why? I don't know. You'll just remember the number. Now, when you leave here, you're going to remember that there was a gigantic 70% across the screen. So if you're going to say something like 1 in every 3, you could make it like 1, and then small in every, and then large 3. Something like this. And you're going to remember it as opposed to if the number was like very small. Because people don't really think in terms of numbers, maybe unless you're a math major. Like numbers are like very abstract things, so you want to make them as concrete as possible. And usually the bigger they are, the easier they are to remember. Okay. Let's go to animations, and animations are really fun. Like a lot of people don't use animations properly. They like use the sound effects with like the clapping and like the screeching of the brakes, and it's really annoying. So that's rule number 1 of animations: never use the sound effects. But there are a lot of things you can do with animations other than just like make the text appear. Let me give you a couple of examples. You know what a progress bar is? This is something that consultants and like corporate people like so that they take you through the stages of the presentation. This is a shape called a chevron, and you can find it in the shapes. And if you want to show the flow of your presentation, you can just make a colored bar move across the screen like that. And there are a couple of other things you can do. You could use circles, and you could make the circles change shapes. You could use like plain blue bars and then make one of them dissolve. You could use a triangle that moves across a line. These are all things that will take you less than 30 seconds to do, and I'll show you how to do them later. But these are things that show you, okay, so now we're moving from part 1 to part 2 of my presentation, and you can use like a progress bar for that. You can also be a bit more adventurous and make something that moves like this. Again, depends on your presentation. This is probably for a more fun thing. But when you get the slides, you can copy this and you can use it on your own presentations. Change the colors if you want. Add some more text there. But these are things that they're things that will wake you up. Like, oh, that's cute, and then you'll remember the presentation because these things are cool. They're fun. But at the end of the day, what's important is your presentation and what you're delivering, and you're trying to get your audience to remember it as much as possible. And sometimes the cool gimmicks will help them remember that because they remember, oh yeah, I remember that. That was right after like the moving squiggle or something like that. Flowcharts. If you ever have to do like a flowchart for a company, like showing the CEO and then the COO and the CTO, where they're all located. So sometimes you can do the typical one and you can make that in PowerPoint, but you can be a bit more adventurous and you can do something like this, where this is like step 1 and then it changes color, and then step 2 is going to come up, and then step 3 is going to come up, and they like fade in color. Again, something that looks like, oh, I've never seen a PowerPoint do that before, but you can, and it just makes it look so much more interesting. Another thing that you might want to consider for animations are stories. Sometimes you want to tell us, let's say you have a startup and you're presenting like, this is how somebody will encounter my startup. You can use animations to do this. So this is an example. So there's a man and a woman and they meet, they fall in love, and then they have a baby. Okay, pretty fast story. That's moving really quickly. You could probably extend that a bit longer, put have a date or something. But this is really easy, and you don't even have to know how to draw these things. There's a great website called The Noun Project, thenounproject.com, and you can download these for free. All you have to do is credit them in the attribution. It's attributed to them. And this is all animations, and it's all like, if you don't know how to use like After Effects, you can tell a story pretty easily using these images, and it's a lot better than just me standing here telling you a story about a man and a woman. Okay. We're nearing the end. I didn't realize this would go so quickly. Branding. So if you have especially for like corporate work, sometimes you'll want to add some branding to your PowerPoint. And there's some easy ways to do this. One way is to just put your logo in the bottom left-hand corner. A lot of people don't think about doing this, but this is a great way to help your clients remember who you are, what your logo looks like. You could also use a watermark, make the logo a bit larger, and then lower the opacity a bit, make it look a bit more imposing, but still just right there in the background. Or you could put just a solid dark gray bar and put your logo in front. So again, very, very simple, but these are and you could probably put the logo or the name of your club in the website on the bottom, just so they see it. If you want to put copyright information, some people like to do that. You can put it there as well, just so it's not as obtrusive and it looks a lot better. So 3 final tips before you go. Well, not really. We're going to go through like the rest of it afterwards. But a couple of final words. Number 1, be logical. And this is something that's kind of confusing. Like, how logic, PowerPoint? There is a lot of logic. So in terms of, for example, following a consistent format. Like, for example, you notice that I would use a solid colored screen with a large number to divide the talk into 3 parts. If I was going to change that and make it, I don't know, say like a gray background and make the number smaller, that wouldn't follow the logic of my presentation. So one of the things you always want to make sure is that you remain consistent when it comes to logic. You don't want to have things like fly around for no reason. Things should always have a reason, and if you're just adding things for the sake of it, then you should start questioning that, because your audience is always going to wonder like, why did he do that, or why did she do that? The only time you can have like some kind of weird logic is if you're delivering a presentation like this, in which case I can put everything and just throw it all there, and it kind of makes sense. Second, develop your style. So what you saw here was my style. I like to use a lot of bright colors. I like to use, I like to use some grays and some light grays. I don't like, everything is kind of flat. There's no 3D glossy, glossy textures. But you might like that, and that's fine. And you can spend some time developing your style, figuring out, maybe I don't like bright colors as much. I want to use like just purple or pink, and you can do that, and you can figure out a style that works for you. And third, there's no shame in imitation. You can take this presentation and use it for your classes, and that's fine. You learned something from this. You can also go to the internet. There's a great website called Note and Point, noteandpoint.com. They have like a bunch of sample PowerPoints that you can copy, and that it's pretty easy to use. And you can steal like little elements from different PowerPoints. Like I didn't invent these things. These are things that I copied also from other slides I saw and other presentations I saw. And there's no shame in that. Okay? Well, that's it.